So get this, our main character, Kim Jin-ho, is a total beast of a pro fighter. We're talking a 37-fight win streak, all 100% knockouts. He's so bored with being undefeated, he even grinds the hardest game ever, Last Savior. He's been playing it non-stop for years, like not a single day off, just chasing a thrill. So he finally gets to the final boss. Demon King Isar figures out his moves are super basic and is about to totally own him as he winds up for the final hit. He's actually wishing it wouldn't be over. But boom, he lands the final blow. The Demon King is toast. And just like that, he's the champ of two worlds. He's so ticked off, he literally chucks his mouse. He's like, who's next to freaking Grizzly Bear? Then out of nowhere, lightning zaps his apartment. And that's when things got seriously weird. He slowly starts to come to feeling all dizzy and like he's on fire. Some voice is just chanting 218 over and over. He cracks his eyes open, rain's pouring on him, and he's like, wait, when did I even go outside? Next thing he knows, some dude grabs him, yelling in his face, totally freaking him out. The guy's all frantic like, what are you doing? Why didn't you answer me? We gotta go. We have to bounce like right now. Jin-ho, still totally out of it, just asks who the guy is. Then he spots the number 172 on the dude's uniform and sees a bunch of people in orange jumpsuits sprinting for a gate. The gate has this flag with an eagle on it, and he swears he's seen that symbol before. Number 172 is screaming that this is it, their last shot, their one and only chance to break out of this dump. Carion. Jin-ho's mind is blown. He's like, wait, did you say Carion for real? 172 just yells that there's no time to chill and tells him to get a move on. But Jin-ho's just frozen trying to process it all. He's thinking this has to be a dream while watching all the other prisoners yanking on the gate, almost getting it open. Then it starts to hit him that this is way too real. He can feel the rain, the mud, everything. He's like, no way. Did I get sucked into the game? Being a prisoner sucks, and there are way too many unanswered questions, but getting out of here is priority number one. He yells for 172 to hold up, but the guy just calls him a psycho and tells him to quit messing around. Jin-ho just brushes it off and asks him about the situation. Doesn't this whole thing feel off? He asks. If this is legit Carion, it shouldn't be this easy. It's way too sloppy. 172 is all. It's 'cause Chief Clark's not here. Confused. Jin-ho kind of pauses. But 172 just yells again. Clark had to jet out earlier, this is our chance. He's trying to get Jin-ho to snap out of it and run. But instead, Jin-ho yanks 172 back by his shirt, right as all the other prisoners are making a break for the gate. 172 totally freaks out, screaming, what are you doing? Jin-ho doesn't say a word, 'cause he knows if what the guy said is true, then this whole setup makes a twisted kind of sense. But his gut, his champion's instinct is screaming at him not to go through that gate. 172 is fighting him, trying to break free and yelling, let go. But Jin-ho holds on tight. Then all of a sudden, one of the prisoners yells, it's opening, thinking they're home free. This huge crowd of inmates just floods through, laughing and running for what they think is freedom. And then blood sprays everywhere. Some dude's arm just got lopped off. Everyone freezes, totally stunned, as Chief Clark shows up with a squad of soldiers. A wide, nasty grin spreads across Clark's face as he calls them a bunch of scumbags. He doesn't even blink, just tells his soldiers to take out every single prisoner trying to make a run for it. 172 is just staring horrified, asking why Clark is back, but before Jin-ho can answer, he screams at him, shut up and run! Without even thinking, 172 just bolts after him. The other prisoners are scrambling to get back, but some get cut down before they can even turn around. A few seconds later, it's dead silent. Clark strolls back inside and tells his soldiers to get all the survivors lined up like now. The guards are screaming at them, forcing them to stand right in front of the bodies of the other inmates. 172 looks down at all the dead bodies and just loses it. He totally hurls. A guard sees it and just boots him right in the gut, yelling at him not to move. 172 starts choking and coughing as the soldier screams that anyone who moves is next. Looking at the armed guys all around them, Jin-ho realizes they're not even that tough, like basically kids with weapons, and another bloodbath could pop off any second now. And if it does, he knows he's gonna have to throw down. Just then, Clark stops right in front of him with this smug look and says he's a lucky one. He mockingly asks, what, not even brave enough to run? Then Clark sneers that magicians are a bunch of cowards, and it's embarrassing to even think of them as rivals. He leans in real close, calls him by his name, Arahan, and warns him he's gonna wish he'd died today. Then he just walks off, telling him to watch his back. Jin-ho just stares at his reflection in a bloody puddle on the ground, wondering if that name is really his. A week goes by, and the only thing they do in this camp is stack rocks into towers, a totally pointless job just meant to mess with them. After a few days of this, he figures out a couple things about this new body. It's super weak and frail, like he gets totally gassed just from lifting one stupid rock. He figures he's about 15 years old. At night, he sneaks around and tries to use magic remembering. They called him a magician, but no matter what he does, nothing happens. He thinks it's super weird that this Arahan kid can't use magic, especially since the Arahan family is famous for having the best magicians. It makes zero sense that he has no magic, but then he figures it out. That must be why he got dumped here. The Arahan family has plenty of other kids, I guess. The guard starts yelling at him to move the stone tower to the other side and is like, what are you waiting for? When he gets zero response, the guard literally screams at him, asking why he's not moving. He just stays quiet, picks up the rock and hauls it over to the other side. He glances up and sees this status screen that says synchronization is in progress. It's totally bogged down with data and stuck at 78%, making him wonder if it's ever going to be done. A little later, it's chow time. All the inmates shuffle into the gross, messy kitchen. He just stares at the stale bread and watery soup, letting out a totally frustrated sigh. Ever since he got here, he's been working out like crazy, but he's getting nowhere, because the food is literal garbage. 172 spots him and asks if he's skipping breakfast again. Instead of answering, he just shoves his bread over to 172, who happily snags it. Watching the guy chow down, he thinks about how all the other prisoners steer clear of him, but 172 is just different, a whole vibe. In the legendary Arahan mage line, there's this story going around about Arahan's signature red eyes. The legend says they're a curse you get from ending too many lives. People are convinced that if you lock eyes with him, you're toast. He knows 172 is about his age and that they're even cellmates. He figures they were probably cool before he, took over this body, but he has zero memory of it. Still, he can't help but wonder why a kid like 172 is locked up in the Carion detention center. 172 then leans in and tells him to watch his back these days. Totally confused, he asks what he's talking about. 172 explains that because of him, the workload has gotten way heavier, and the other inmates are getting super ticked off. He tells him to maybe just chill for a bit. It finally clicks why all the prisoners have been so on edge lately. Dropping his voice to a whisper, 172 tells him to seriously watch out for number 589. Apparently, he's the shot caller in here. He says 589 was a big deal in the arena and landed in this place for offing people. He asks 172 if it's not super dangerous for him to be seen with him considering all that. 172 just says he's kinda grown to like him and can't just look the other way. He gets up and is he appreciates the concern, but tells him he's in the way and needs to bounce. 172 is totally confused, asking what he's suddenly talking about. Before he can even answer, they hear footsteps coming. He turns to the sound and tells 172 that the thing he was just warning him about is about to go down. At first, 172 is just confused, but then his face completely changes to pure shock when he sees 589 rolling up with his crew of pissed-off inmates. 589 calls out to him saying the reason their workload has gotten heavier is all his fault. Totally unfazed, he just smirks and goes, "So what?" adding that if that's the deal, he'll just use it as a workout. Out of nowhere, 589 throws a punch right at his face. 172 jumps up totally shocked and yelling his name, but before 589 can follow up, he grabs the guy by the collar, smiles and slams his knee right into his chin. The hit leaves 172 and the other inmates completely speechless. But plot twist, 589 just stares at him and asks what he thinks he's doing. It hits him then his attacks are doing absolutely nothing. He's like, "Man, how weak is this body." 589 grabs him by the collar and just lifts him up with one hand like it's nothing. Then with insane strength, he chucks him against the wall. 172 screams his name, worried, but 589 completely ignores him, looking around and yelling about where that little rat went. He swears the guy is dead today. As he's lying there on the floor, that screen suddenly flashes in front of him. And it says, "Synchronization complete." A smirk plays on his lips. He gets to his feet as all his real-world power just floods into Aaron's body, and he slowly clenches and unclenches his fist. He does a couple of quick jumps just feeling out his new strength. Then he gets into a fighting stance and taunts 589 saying they should pick up where they left off. 589 just laughs, mocking him and asking what their so-called young master is so cocky about, especially since his own clan totally ditched him. But he just tells 589 to shut up and bring it. Then he smirks, asking if he's scared. Totally triggered, 589 charges, screaming he's gonna give him the death he's begging for. As he gets close, he throws a kick, but he's caught off guard when 589 actually catches his foot. The guy just sneers, telling him that he's about to learn his place. But before the dude can make a move, he twists his whole body and smacks him in the head with his other foot. 589 is totally stunned and seeing stars for a second as he lands perfectly on the ground. Before 589 can even shake it off, he launches another kick, catching him right under the chin. 589 spits up blood, but before he can even fall, he's in the air again, landing another insane kick. The force sends 589 stumbling back before he just collapses to the ground. He looks down at him and says, "See, this is why I try not to use my legs." That's when 589's goons rush him with knives drawn, screaming that they're gonna make him suffer. Totally unfazed, he just strolls over to 589, puts his foot on his back and yells at the other prisoners not to move an inch. Everyone is just frozen watching as he cranks 589's arms back hard. He warns them that if they take one more step, he'll make it so their boss will be eating through a straw for the rest of his life. And if they don't like it, they can go get the warden. The prisoners are dead silent, just watching him super carefully. He asks if they think this is some kind of joke or if they don't believe him. To prove he's serious, he gives 589's arms another hard twist, making the other prisoners totally freak out. One of them immediately bolts, yelling that he's going to get the warden. The rest of the crew helps 589 up and he just glares, swearing he won't let this go next time. He just sighs, knowing it's all talk. A little later, back in their cell, 172 is buzzing, asking where he learned to fight like that, saying it was seriously epic. Then 172 suddenly clocks something weird and is like, "Yo, were you always this tall? I swear you were my height." But he just blows it off, telling him to keep heaving those stones. 172 is totally confused, asking if he seriously thinks lifting rocks is gonna make him taller. He just figures the synchronization must have converted his real-life stats into game stats. Still, compared to his real body, this one feels like a total downgrade, like a little kid's. But whatever, the main thing right now is the stat screen. Pulling up his status window, he checks out his class. Magician, and his traits are kinda stacked: poison immunity, immortal duelist, tenacious challenger, champion's noble soul, and archmage's blessing. All of them are SGR. But then he spots a major penalty. His stats are slashed by 50% cause of stunted growth. But the real kicker? He has no mana. He's like, is this a joke for real? 0 mana? He knows Zed Arahan was supposed to be a magician. He is an Arahan, so how in the world does Zed have no mana? And why'd they give him such trash stats and then just yoink his consciousness into this body? He just keeps mashing the mana stat completely in disbelief, before he just bursts out laughing. 172, who's been watching this whole time, is like, what the heck are you doing? A second later, sprawled out on his prison bed, he can't get over how much this character sucks. He's guessing Zed was just tossed aside by the Bannon clan. But knowing the Arahan family, that's not exactly a surprise. Those guys are straight up heartless, not an ounce of empathy. Taking a second to chill, he decides to check everything out piece by piece. Looking at his status window again, he finally finds a silver lining. Zed's strength, agility, endurance, and perception are all maxed at 100. Dope. Even with that stunted growth penalty, he knows that a body made of nothing. But skin and bones can't possibly pull off those kinds of stats. He guesses he can probably grind his way past the penalty with some training, but Zed's diet is seriously whack. Then he spots a few traits he has never seen before, and they're all S rank. The ones he does recognize are the ones he earned in-game, like poison immunity and immortal duelist. It hits him that if Zed's mana wasn't 0, he'd be a completely broken, overpowered character. Then he clocks the Archmage's blessing trait, and knows it's not just for looks. Sitting up, he tells himself he'll figure out the rest as he goes. The big thing is, there have to be ways to fix this mana problem. Right then, a guard starts shouting for the prisoners to listen up. Anyone whose number gets called has to step forward. He's confused, but 172 just lets out a sigh, 'cause he already knows what's about to go down. They're getting hauled out again. The soldier starts rattling off numbers, and one by one prisoners step out of their cells. Then they get chained up and led away. Curious, he asks 172 who those people are. 172 says they're the death row inmates, prisoners on their way to their last meal. He asks what a final meal is. 172 explains that it means they get to eat whatever they want before they kick the bucket. A smile starts to creep across his face. He's got an idea. He then asks 172 what his name is. It dawns on 172 that they've only been calling each other by their numbers. He finally introduces himself as RIU and asks for his name. With a little bit of pride, he answers Zed Arahan. Then he asks RIU if he wants to get out of this dump, which totally confuses RIU, making him ask what he's talking about. RIU then tells him he wasn't planning on staying long anyway, and has his own reasons to bounce. This gets him to ask RIU if he's thought about how to escape. RIU says that the only exit is their front gate and the warden's holding the key. He then asks RIU if that means they gotta take down the warden to swipe the key, but RIU just asks if he's lost his mind, and reminds him that the warden may be retired, but he's still a 5-circle knight. He knows Warden Clark is the definition of a knight filled with a major hate-on for magicians, and in The Last Savior universe game, knights and magicians absolutely despise each other. He then wonders if he can even win against Clark right now, and starts thinking of a plan B. That's when RIU tells him to just steal from Clark, which just confuses him. RIU explains that people from the streets learn to pick pockets before they learn their manners, but there are always way too many eyes on Clark, so there's almost never a good opening. He thinks for a second while RIU messes around with his hands. A smirk spreads across his face, and he tells RIU that as a matter of fact, he's starting to get an idea of how they can escape. The next day, the guards are yelling at the prisoners that work is starting, and by order of the warden, the workload is getting jacked up even more. Starting today, they're not walking, they're running, which totally shocks all the prisoners, who start complaining and asking how many times they have to do this, telling the guards to make the workload reasonable. The guards just ask if they're trying to defy the warden's orders. One of the prisoners, totally pissed, starts talking trash about the guards, but a soldier immediately points his sword at the guy's neck, explaining he's just passing on the warden's orders. So if he has a problem, he should take it up with the warden himself. The prisoner starts to panic, asking if this isn't going way too far, and demanding to know why they're doing all this. The guards just trade a look before one of them peeks to the side and stares straight at Jin-ho, asking if they really still don't know whose fault it is. All the prisoners then turn to stare at Jin-ho in total silence. The soldier clears his throat and walks away, saying he needs to step out for a quick smoke break. RIU, looking super worried, warns Jin-ho about the bad vibe, but he just tells RIU to stay away from him. He knows Clark is straight up trying to start a riot since Clark can't get his own hands dirty. He's trying to use the other prisoners to take him out. He can't believe that this so-called honorable knight of all people is pulling a shady stunt like this. He watches RIU successfully make a break for it while, still staring at him, it clicks that even Clark is in on this whole thing, but he swears he's not letting it slide like yesterday, because he can't let Zed get taken out. The prisoners start closing in, looking majorly pissed, thinking they've got to end him or they're totally done for. He just smirks and tells them he gets where they're coming from, that it's just a situation they're all stuck in, which just makes the prisoners furious. They all charge him, yelling, asking if he's still pulling that high and mighty Arahan act, saying he's such a typical Banan. He drives his knee into the closest guy, right in the chin, shocking everyone else. The dude slams to the ground and he's like, see, wasn't I right? I can't just let myself get wiped out either. The prisoners think he's totally lost it, but he calmly says he's been needing a place to vent. So this is actually great. The prisoners are like, dude, are you nuts? You're about to get wrecked. They then inch closer to him, but he just smiles and gets his fists ready. He waits for them, and when they all jump him at once, he kicks the first guy away, then lands 2 kicks on the second prisoner, remembering how he used to dream of this in the octagon. He wishes they'd stop coming one by one and just go all in. He then elbows a prisoner in the ribs and kicks another one in front of him, shouting, "This is the rush I've been missing." He remembers they always said they wanted to fight a whole crowd and challenges the rest of the prisoners to go all out and bring it. He instantly glances to his side, dodges a punch, then cracks the guy in the chin with his elbow. He then rushes another prisoner, punching him square in the face, then slams a fist into his gut before hitting another guy on the chin, the fourth on the side of the head, and the fifth with a double punch to the jaw. On the flip side, RIU is watching the whole thing from behind a pile of rocks. He's totally amazed, wondering what in the world he's even seeing. But then someone calls RIU from behind. He looks back and sees it's 589, telling him to come over for a sec. Meanwhile, Jin-ho is still busy taking down the prisoners around him. When the others realize they have zero chance against his fists, they pull out their knives and charge him all at once. He dodges one of the guys trying to shank him from the side and just decks him. He then ducks under a bunch of other knives aimed at his head and uppercuts a guy so hard he drops his knife before hitting the floor. Jin-ho feels that awesome rush when he dodges an attack and the thrill of landing a solid hit. He knows he's addicted to this feeling. It's why he got into martial arts in the first place. He punches a guy near him and shoves another. They're all trying to stab him, but he just wants more. He's actually enjoying this, taking down these guys who are trying to off him. Then someone steps up and calls his name. Jin-ho looks over after dropping another prisoner and sees number 245, warning him that it would be way better if he quit his little rampage and just let them finish him because friends are precious or whatever. At that exact moment, 589 is grabbing RIU, who's struggling, and yelling Jin-ho's name. Prisoner 245 then asks, "Don't you agree?" Jin-ho just smirks and calls them trash, telling them they just messed up big time. But 245 just laughs, telling him all he's got is a big mouth and that he should feel honored to even get his attention since he's a two-circle knight. 245 then leaps at him, calling him a pathetic Arahan with no mana, and throws the knife right for him, yelling that he's about to meet his doom. But Jin-ho just calmly waits as the knife zips toward him. The blade stabs into the ground because he's just vanished. 245 yanks the knife out, totally confused, asking where he disappeared to. But then he's shocked to see 589 on the ground, out cold, and RIU totally free, all in a matter of seconds. 245 yells, demanding to know what he did, insisting he can't use magic. Jin-ho calmly replies that it wasn't magic. Then spreading his feet, he flows into motion, moving so smoothly it's like he's dancing. 245 is stunned, when in just a blink he's right in his face, landing a perfect 360 spinning kick that slams him to the ground, knocking him out instantly. But then he suddenly hears RIU start to stutter, saying something about the chief. He looks back and sees Clark coming over with more soldiers. Clark shouts his name and tells him to start explaining. RIU rushes over, explaining that Jin-ho was the victim, and that they even took him hostage to try and get to him, saying it was all self-defense. Clark just frowns at Ryu's explanation and calls the whole group of prisoners stupid idiots. He then asks if he used his mana, but Jin-ho just shrugs and says, "I wonder," which really ticks Clark off. Clark then lets out this intense aura, forcing everyone down to their knees with its insane pressure, making it hard to even breathe. RIU gets forced down too, but Jin-ho is still standing, which totally freaks RIU out. He's wondering why he's not affected by Clark's aura, since no regular person can handle the pressure from a 5-circle knight. He's trying to figure out what's going on when a panel pops up showing that his champion's noble soul trait resists suppression. He thinks, is this like a resistance buff or a mental immunity thing? Smiling, he realizes this is a totally OP ability, but he wouldn't expect anything less. After all, he was at the very top back in his world, so there's no way some amateur 5-circle knight like Clark is going to bring him down. Clark is shocked that he's still standing there totally fine, even without unlocking his mana, which just totally pisses him off, thinking he's some useless nobody. Clark takes a huge breath, powering up even more, and then unleashes his full aura, making the ground totally crack apart. Anyone not strong enough just drops totally in agony, but somehow he's still on his feet, his champion's noble soul just pushing right through it. With a total smirk, he wonders what Clark's next move is. Clark is bugging out like he can't believe his eyes and starts yelling about what's going on. Even the soldiers writhing in pain are begging Clark to chill out. listening to his guys. Clark finally dials back his aura and just stares at him thinking, whoa, good thing I got a grip. He almost lost his cool and went full-on berserk with his sword. Clark then spins around and orders the prisoners to get back to the grind. But then he stops Clark, telling him he's actually got something to say. Clark glances back like, what now? He says he is so overstacking those stone towers and is done stressing about when these guys are gonna jump him. That's why he's decided to just end this whole charade. Ryu's totally lost, asking him what the heck he's even talking about. But he just keeps going, telling Clark he's going to become a death row inmate. Clark is completely floored and asks if he has any clue what that even means. He then warns him that if this is just some spur-of-the-moment crazy idea, they'll just pretend this conversation never happened. But he asks Clark if he's worried he might flake, insisting they lock it in on the crystal ball. Clark replies that, you can't get better proof than that. Totally stoked, Clark yells for a soldier to bring the crystal ball like ASAP. He then reminds Clark that they say death row inmates can have whatever they want for their last meal, and he's already got his order picked out. He adds that for his final feast he wants Verity beef and not just a little bit. He wants a massive portion, enough to totally stuff his face. The soldiers are just standing there, jaws on the floor, because they can't believe what they're hearing, knowing that stuff is insanely expensive. Verity beef is like the most top-shelf beef raised all natural on the Verity Prairie in the Southern Empire, and one of the most legendary dishes in the Last Savior game. It's so good it can totally recharge your stamina, and eating it could literally flip a whole battle. There's even a quest where you literally bribe NPCs with it. Jin-ho knows he's got a major fight on the horizon, so he needs to power up while he's got the chance. Besides, he's dying to see what all the hype is about, at least one time. He then asks Clark, isn't that fair since it's literally my life on the line? He adds that he only messes with S-rank items and warns them that if they try to pull a fast one, he will call the whole thing off. Ryu's totally bugging out, asking why he'd want to be on death row, which is when Jin-ho finally notices Ryu is right there. Without skipping a beat, he tells Clark that Ryu's in on this too, and that they better make enough for 2 people to pig out. Ryu's just standing there, completely lost and totally shocked. Clark agrees and tells his soldiers to make it happen, which freaks them out, but they all reply with a super hesitant yes, since what choice do they have? Clark then explains to his guys that when you're talking about ending an Arun's life, this is the least they can do. Jin-ho just smirks, telling Clark it's nice when they can finally see eye to eye, leaving poor Ryu's head spinning, only able to stutter out, what about my idea? The Verity beef takes a whole week to get a hold of because it's so rare. During that time, Jin-ho doesn't slack off on his work for a second. Instead, he's got the guards waiting on him while he keeps up his training. Ryu just lets out this huge sigh, not believing that even when he's staring down the end of the line, he still finds time to work out. But Jin-ho just tunes him out, thinking about that wild system in LAS. He knows that if even a single one of his stats hits 100, all experience points get funneled to his other stats. Since all of his stats except mana are already maxed, any XP he grinds now is going to go straight to his mana. A soldier then calls out to them. Jin-ho just casually gets up and asks if it's finally here, while Ryu is totally freaking out, yelling and asking if this is it for him too. An epic spread of Verity beef is laid out in front of them. Ryu, just completely overwhelmed, snags a whole chunk of perfectly cooked beef with literal tears in his eyes as he chows down in total bliss. He shouts that he's never tasted anything this good in his entire life. Jin-ho's got to remind him not to forget that it's all because of him. As he eats, Jin-ho realizes that besides tasting insane, the performance buff it gives is seriously next level. Panels just keep popping up in front of him, showing that some of his penalties have been partially lifted. He keeps on eating, feeling like all that blocked off XP is just flooding in all at once. Smiling, he knows that mission number 1 is officially a success. Now it's time for phase 2 of his plan. Meanwhile, over in the chief's office, a soldier tells Clark the big meal has started. Clark nods and orders the soldier to make sure nobody gets near it. As he sits there thinking, Clark wonders what really went down that day. There was no sign of anyone being forced, yet the whole vibe was just totally off even. Though he's retired, he's still a 5-circle knight, which means there's just no way some rookie mage who hasn't even unlocked his mana could handle his aura. He looks down at his glowing bracelet, and this weird feeling starts creeping into his head. Something was seriously wrong that day. This time he swears he's gonna get some real answers. Minutes later, Jin-ho and Ryu were done eating. Ryu lets out a huge burp and a satisfied sigh, saying he feels like he could die right now with 0 regrets. But Jin-ho tells him they can't check out just yet, feeling totally stuffed and totally energized. He could feel his whole body buzzing with power. He figured he could probably pound a punching bag all day long and was dying to test out his new strength. Just then, the door swung open. Both Jin-ho and Ryu snapped their heads around to look. Jin-ho was like, so Clark finally decided to show up. Without skipping a beat, he told Clark the food was long gone and waited to see what would happen next. Clark walked up to them, saying his name. With a smirk, Jin-ho teased him, "What you pouting 'cause you missed out on dinner?" He watched Clark with this unreadable expression as he got closer, that glowing bracelet still wrapped around his wrist. A smirk played on Clark's lips as he met Jin-ho's eyes. For now, Clark promised himself he'd make that smug face of his twist in agony. Clark knew he came from the top-tier magic family, which meant even a tiny bit of info on him could be worth a fortune. Depending on how good the intel was, they might even be able to ditch this dead-end corner of the world. His bracelet suddenly let out a wave of magic which started to creep around him. He didn't hesitate unleashing all the magic in the bracelet plus his own aura making. Jin-ho realized it was some kind of crazy powerful magic tool. Clark smirked and asked him what he thought, adding that not even he could survive it. But to Clark's total shock, Jin-ho was completely chill and totally unfazed. Ryu, though, stumbled back in pain, gasping for air as he grabbed Clark's coat to keep from falling. Annoyed, Clark shoved him off hard before blasting his aura right at him, cranking up the pressure. Ryu choked, barely hanging on against the force. Jin-ho, still not breaking a sweat, called out to Clark and told him to get a grip. This just made Clark even more furious. He focused all his aura on Jin-ho, calling him a cocky little punk. But Jin-ho just smirked, standing his ground thanks to his great-ass champion's noble soul. Frustrated, Clark refused to give up. He grabbed Jin-ho's shoulders and tried to force even more aura into him. Jin-ho just sighed, swatted his hands away, and stood up, telling Clark to take it easy. Clark was stunned. Jin-ho added that if he really wanted to off someone, he should just have them executed right and stop whining like a little brat. Clark was totally speechless. His magic item, his aura, nothing worked. It made zero sense. If his mana had no effect, that meant Jin-ho's power was at least one whole circle higher than his. Was Jin-ho a six-circle magician? No way, that was impossible. Then Clark saw Jin-ho's blood-red eyes and wondered if it was the power of the Arahan bloodline. A five-circle knight like Clark had trained his whole life, and yet he couldn't even make some newbie magician bend the knee. Slowly he had to face it, he couldn't beat Jin-ho. As he calmed down, he shut off the magic tool. Jin-ho asked him if he was done with his little temper tantrum. Clark stayed quiet, turned away, and reminded them the execution was still on for dawn, saying that even he, the great Arahan, couldn't just ignore a law from the Emperor. He told him to enjoy his last night. Later. Back in the warden's office, Clark was busy writing up a report. He stopped, though, realizing he still hadn't pieced it all together. He figured this info could be some primo intel for active knights, so he wrote down everything that happened that day. But he was completely wiped. After pushing his mana to the max and using his magic tool on full blast, Clark was totally drained, and even though he wanted to finish his report, he was just too tired and passed out into a deep sleep. Meanwhile, back in the cell, moonlight streamed in through the bars, waking Ryu up. Jin-ho asked him if he was awake and how he was feeling. Ryu groaned that he felt sick, like he was about to hurl. Jin-ho just grinned, saying he was pretty slick with his hands. Ryu let out a confident chuckle, showing off a set of keys he'd hidden up his sleeves. He held them up proudly and asked Jin-ho what he thought of his skills. Jin-ho smirked and gave him a nod, knowing that for a normal person, that would have been super risky, but Ryu was surprisingly tough. Ryu explained it only worked because Clark was completely zoned in on Jin-ho, then asked if he was for real okay. Jin-ho told him he was fine, but Ryu wasn't buying it, saying that something felt off, that there was definitely something Jin-ho wasn't telling him. Jin-ho just brushed it off and told Ryu to keep lifting those stones to get stronger. He then checked his stats and noticed something insane. His strength, agility, and endurance debuffs had dropped by 10 points. It was an amazing result, exactly as promised. He could totally feel the change in his body, and man, it felt good. He wished he could just zap away all the penalties, but he knew that was a total long shot. So he plopped down and told Ryu that they had to bounce that night. As soon as Ryu felt a bit better, they were out of there. Ryu was hesitant, asking if they really had to go right then, warning him that Clark would notice any second. But Jin-ho just smiled, telling Ryu that Clark was probably knocked out cold by now, so there was nothing to worry about. Still not convinced, Ryu pushed, asking how he could be so sure. Jin-ho explained that Clark's bracelet was such a rare item that even he couldn't remember its name, but he knew it gave a huge power boost while also hitting you with a massive wave of exhaustion. He had zero doubt. Clark was passed out somewhere. That thought made everything way easier, especially since Clark had waltzed into the feast room with the key and then used that magic tool just minutes later. Jin-ho told Ryu it was go time. Ryu, still looking nervous, asked if he was absolutely sure. Jin-ho just said if he was scared there was nothing he could do about it, which totally caught Ryu off guard. Frustrated, Ryu yelled, "Jin-ho, you gotta stick with me, you're my sidekick." But after checking out the swiped keys, he was like, "Dude, none of these are for the cell. Now what?" Jin-ho just told Ryu, "Hey, back up from the gate for a sec." Ryu was kinda confused, but trusted him, so he did it, no questions asked. Then Jin-ho just straight up kicked the cell door open, and Ryu was totally frozen, like jaw on the floor. He just stared at this busted door and was like, "Whoa, what kind of power was that? Are you like a legit magician or something?" Jin-ho didn't even answer. He just walked out of the cell like it was nothing. Of course, all that noise got the guards' attention. They came rushing over, totally panicking. They were all like, "What do you think you're doing?" But Jin-ho, super casual, just shot back, "I don't know, what else would I be doing in here?" It took him a second, but the guards finally put two and two together. They finally got what was happening and screamed, "It's a jailbreak!" One of them took off to snitch to Clark, while the others scrambled to stop them. Jin-ho and Ryu made a mad dash for the main gate. All of a sudden, Ryu yelled, "Look out ahead!" Jin-ho whipped his head around and saw a bunch of soldiers blocking the exit, swords drawn and ready. The soldiers were shouting that they had to stop them no matter what. Don't stop, just keep running, Jin-ho screamed at Ryu. Without even thinking, he just leaped forward. Ryu yelled back, "You got it!" and charged straight at the soldiers ahead. One of them swung his sword trying to take him out, trying to slice Jin-ho, but he dodged the attack like it was nothing. Jin-ho then shot his hand out, grabbed the soldier by the face, and straight up chucked him into the others, blocking their path. The dude slammed into 2 other soldiers, sending them all down in a heap, which left their captain totally shook. The captain and Jin-ho locked eyes, but before the guy could even move, Jin-ho's hand was already in his face. He hit the captain in the neck, making the guy scream out. Not even pausing, Jin-ho then bolted toward the soldier he'd just thrown, kicking him out of the way and sending him crashing into 2 more guards, who were just trying to help their buddy. He then kept charging at the 4 who were left. One of the soldiers tried to slice him, but Jin-ho just smoothly ducked right under the blade. He did this sick mid-air roll and kicked the soldier in the head on his way through. The guy was out cold instantly. The second soldier lunged at him, trying to stab him, but Jin-ho was moving at like superhuman speed. He dodged to the side, planted one hand on the ground to balance, and used the momentum to kick the soldier square in the face, sending him flying. Jin-ho landed perfectly on his feet and immediately glanced over his shoulder. 2 more soldiers were rushing him at the exact same time. He cursed under his breath, but then got this excited grin on his face. In a split second, he hit them both with a powerful kick at the same time, knocking them out cold. Ryu, who was watching from a little ways off, just stopped in his tracks, not believing what he was seeing. Jin-ho's power was totally insane. A moment later, Clark finally got there, and his face was just frozen in shock as he looked at the mess of his soldiers. The guys who were supposed to be on guard duty were all over the ground, and most of them looked seriously messed up. One of the soldiers, still awake weakly, apologized and reported that prisoners 218 and 172 had escaped. Clark's eyes shot to the wide-open main gate, and his shock instantly turned to rage. Without a second thought, he screamed at the top of his lungs, ordering all his soldiers to go after Jin-ho immediately. Meanwhile, in Matama village, which was super close to the detention center, Ryu was hiding and checking things out, slowly lifting the lid of a barrel he was in. He whispered, "I think we totally lost Clark's crew." Jin-ho let out a huge sigh of relief, and then asked Ryu where the heck they were. Ryu told him they were in some small town called Moda. It was the only village anywhere near the detention center. Jin-ho asked, "So I'm guessing the guards are going to come here first, right?" And Ryu admitted, "Yeah, we can't really help it. All the other towns are way too far away. But," he said, "if we can just blend in with the locals, we should be fine." Ryu then started digging through a box of old clothes. Jin-ho was like, "Okay, I'll trust you for now, but what exactly are you looking for in there?" Ryu handed him this super torn and nasty shirt, saying, "This is perfect for you, put it on." Jin-ho just scoffed and was like, "Seriously, this is the kind of garbage a homeless person would wear." But Ryu explained that the village was crawling with beggars, so disguising themselves as one was their best bet to stay hidden. A few minutes later, they had changed out of their prison gear and into the raggedy outfits. Ryu told Jin-ho he was going to go get some supplies, and that Jin-ho needed to just stay put and not make a sound. Jin-ho was like, how are you going to do that with 0 money?" But Ryu just smirked. He confidently held up his hand and asked, "Who said anything about needing money?" That's when it hit Jin-ho that Ryu's brain was just wired totally differently. Before taking off, Ryu reminded him again, "Don't go anywhere, you're my sidekick, remember?" And Jin-ho just nodded. 2 hours later, Ryu was back, and Jin-ho asked him what he managed to score. Ryu pulled out a pair of colored contacts and told him to put them in to cover up his red eyes. Jin-ho asked if that would really be enough, and Ryu nodded, reminding him, "Dude, red eyes are a dead giveaway for the Arahan bloodline. You have to be super careful." Ryu then told him that in the southern region, which was Bahal clan territory, blue contacts were super popular with the rich aristocrat types. To them, changing your eye color is just like changing your outfit. Jin-ho instantly recognized the name Bahal. His main character in the game was Torres Bahal, the one he used to clear the final ending. In this magical world, the Arahans were the ultimate sorcerers. Well, the Bahal clan totally owned swordsmanship. And true to the game's lore, the 2 clans absolutely hated each other, and their signature eye colors were total opposites. He thanked Ryu for being so on top of the details, and Ryu just kinda shrugged it off. Was-in then said he'd found a sick hiding spot on the way back, and thought they should crash there for a bit. A little later in the dead of night, they were laid out inside some old stable, tucked away in the spooky forest. Even though he was totally wiped, Jin-ho couldn't sleep, his mind racing trying to figure out how he even got into this mess. When he first woke up here, it was like he'd been sucked straight into a video game, and now he was stuck sleeping in a barn while on the run. Honestly, it was kind of a rush, but he still couldn't figure out why Ryu was clinging to him, calling him his sidekick. Like, even with Clark hunting him down, hanging with him was a death wish. He still didn't have a clue who Ryu really was, just figured he was some street rat and a pickpocket, though he kinda needed the guy's help. For the time being, he was like, can I even trust this dude? What he didn't know was that Ryu lying right next to him was wide awake too. The next morning, Jin-ho woke up and started swearing when he saw the disaster zone they were in. There was mud and animal crap everywhere, and in the dark last night, he'd been totally oblivious. He mumbled to himself like, I can't believe I actually slept in this dump. Ryu, sitting up and yawning, hit him with a sarcastic, "Guess this is a little rough for a fancy noble, huh?" Jin-ho shot back, "Do people actually like living like this?" But Ryu just asked if he seriously thought people choose to live in a place like this. He was like, "Dude, people just live wherever they can to get by." Jin-ho got to his feet totally done with this, swearing he wouldn't spend another night in a dump. He announced that he had to start making some cash because, hello, they needed to eat. Ryu just laughed, asking how he was going to pull that off while dodging the warden. He joked that maybe Jin-ho should pick up a few pickpocketing skills while he was at it. Jin-ho shot that down instantly and just told Ryu to take him to that place he was talking about. Ryu was totally lost, asking what place, and Jin-ho just dropped one word: the arena. Later, down in the underground arena, two guys were on stage going at it in a crazy intense fight. Jin-ho had this little smirk as he watched, while behind him, Ryu was anxiously checking out the scene. The crowd around them went wild, cheering like crazy, which made Ryu whisper nervously that he was pretty sure they'd come to the wrong spot. But Jin-ho just told him they were exactly where they were supposed to be. Their eyes snapped back to the fight where Ikas's opponent actually bit him. Ikas shot back with a fist to the guy's face, but the dude blocked the next hit. That didn't stop Ikas, who just kept coming, landing a brutal shot to his opponent's ribs that cracked a bone. The crowd went nuts, screaming for the fighters to go all out since they'd bet a ton of money on the match. Meanwhile, Jin-ho just watched quietly at first, thinking it'd be some sloppy street fight. But to his surprise, these guys actually had some serious skills, way more than he expected. Ryu, on the other hand, was totally freaking out, looking over his shoulder and stuttering that this place was insane, and they needed to bail like right now. Ikas rushed in and slammed a nasty punch into the other guy's face, making his nose bleed and his head snap back. Ikas didn't let up, just kept hammering the dude's face. Ryu couldn't tear his eyes away, and whispered, all freaked out, that taking someone out here was no big deal, and that Ikas was way stronger than those Carion. Ryu added that trying that net grab move on Ikas would be totally useless. But then, Ryu's confusion turned to pure shock when Jin-ho just vanished. The crowd gasped as Ikas froze mid-punch, his fist caught in Jin-ho's hand. Jin-ho calmly asked Ikas if he hadn't noticed the other guy was already out cold and told him to chill out. Ikas was stunned, and Ryu just stared completely baffled, like, why did Jin-ho just jump in the ring? Jin-ho then turned to some guy on the side and asked if he was the ref, and if someone had paid him off. He was like, why is this fight still going on when it's obviously over? Are there even any rules here? Ikas ripped his hand away and demanded to know what the heck Jin-ho was doing, sarcastically adding that if he was some noble, he'd be in even bigger pain. Jin-ho just asked if Ikas couldn't tell just by looking at him, then announced with a smirk that he was obviously just some kid from the streets. The crowd went ballistic, yelling at the lowlife for ruining their show and demanding their money back. Not even bothered, Jin-ho yelled right back, telling the crowd to shut it and promising he'd take care of it. He announced with total confidence that he should be the one to fight Ikas and promised them they were about to see something seriously epic. Ryu, totally horrified, yelled out his name, begging him to stop. Ryu was like, dude, Ikas is way out of your league and this whole crowd is on his side. The odds are like 1 in 1,000. No 1 in 10,000. Not even the gods or Lady Luck herself could help you win this one. Ryu pleaded with him to fight anyone else, saying that Ikas was a no-go. But still, Jin-ho just calmly told Ryu to chill and trust him completely. Ryu, looking even more freaked out, asked if he was even listening, or if he was just going to keep being so reckless. Ryu screamed at him to just quit and get down from there right now. Jin-ho, totally cool, just called out to Ryu, hey, after this, we're getting steak and eating till we pop. Ryu screamed back, don't you dare jinx it. A second later, as the fight was about to start, the ref yelled for them to begin. Ikas noticed that even though Ryu was having a full-on panic attack, Jin-ho was completely cool and collected. Ikas got confused when Jin-ho put his fist, stepped up with this killer smirk. Ikas was like, dude's gotta be like 15 tops, but his eyes were laser-focused, he was breathing super chill, and his whole vibe was seriously intimidating, like nothing Ikas had ever seen. But still trying to play it cool, Ikas felt his whole body shake and was like, why am I bugging out? Was he actually scared of a nobody like Jin-ho deciding to just end it? Ikas charged in, but in a flash he got knocked right back by a single perfect punch. Ikas stumbled, his nose bleeding, while Jin-ho calmly schooled him that you don't pull a punch way back behind your shoulder. Instead, it's gotta come straight from your guard to your opponent's face, taking the shortest, fastest, and cleanest shot. Without missing a beat, Jin-ho unleashed a blur of punches, leaving Ikas totally helpless and unable to even put his hands up. Ikas was getting pushed back even though he was charging full speed. Jin-ho just planted his feet and threw a massive hit, trying to finish the fight right there. The punch was so hard it sent Ikas' teeth flying out of his mouth, leaving him completely wrecked in just a few minutes. The crowd was freaking out, shouting, and totally confused, wondering who this random guy was, and if Ikas was just messing around with him. Meanwhile, Ryu had his eyes squeezed shut, praying to literally every god he could think of, the god of war, the goddess of fortune, the god of miracles, and the mother of life, begging them to make sure Jin-ho came back in one piece. When all the noise around him got louder, Ryu cracked open one eye, only to see Jin-ho totally dominating Ikas without even breaking a sweat. Ryu's jaw just dropped, like, what is even happening right now? Was Jin-ho for real winning? On the other side of the ring, IS could barely focus. His vision was all blurry and his head was spinning like crazy. He stared at Jin-ho, trying to make it all make sense. How could this kid possibly be taking him down? The thought made IS furious, and in a burst of rage, he threw a wild punch at Jin-ho. He just couldn't deal with losing to someone so young, but Jin-ho dodged the hit like it was nothing and came back with a bunch of super precise punches. The audience was getting annoyed, yelling at IS like, "Dude, why can't you dodge those? They look so simple." Then Jin-ho poured all his power into one fist and threw a final insane punch, sending IS flying backward and slamming him onto the stage. Jin-ho turned to the ref. Like, "Yo, what are you doing? Are we just gonna fight with no rules or what?" The ref hesitated, but knew he had to do something before he lost his job. Stuttering, he raised his hand and announced the match was over and Jin-ho was the winner. Jin-ho was just thinking that the fight ended before he even got a good warm-up in. He thought to himself that he probably should have held back even more. Later in the back, Jin-ho went right up to the coordinator, super mad about the payout. He'd been told the odds were 62-1, but the cash he got was way less than he expected. He accused the guy of trying to scam him because he was young, saying the math was totally wrong. The coordinator swore the calculations were right, but Jin-ho wasn't buying it. As they were arguing, he noticed Ryu looking away, sweating like crazy. Jin-ho turned to Ryu and demanded, "How much did you bet?" Ryu just stayed quiet, which made Jin-ho even more pissed. He reminded Ryu, "I told you to bet everything. They didn't even see a woman walk up and was now standing right there." Ryu stammered out some excuse, saying he hated gambling and that they needed to save some money for dinner. That just made Jin-ho even angrier, and the coordinator started begging them not to make a scene. Just then the woman said hello. Jin-ho turned and saw a lady with 2 massive bodyguards. She asked if she could have a word with them. Jin-ho was surprised and remembered the ref glancing over at her earlier. He asked who she was, and the lady just smiled, saying his clueless vibe meant it was probably his first time at the arena. She introduced herself as Herna, the manager of the place, and asked again to speak with him. Jin-ho, though, just walked right past her with Ryu saying no thank you. Ryu looked back all nervous, obviously recognizing Herna, but before they could get out of there, the 2 bodyguards blocked their way. Jin-ho warned them, asking if they wanted to end up like IS, and maybe sleep for a few days. The guards, though, were like brick walls, totally silent and not moving an inch, completely loyal to Herna. Herna stepped forward and explained that the IS Jin-ho had just beat was a champion she'd scouted from the big city. She asked him if he understood what that meant. Herna then told him she would let him go this time, but they would definitely meet again. Next time, she said they'd talk somewhere more relaxed. She added with a smile that she really, really liked strong people. Jin-ho stared at her for a beat, then just turned and walked away with Ryu. Later, they got to a barbecue joint. Ryu was starving, but warned Jin-ho not to get cocky around Herna, which confused him. Ryu explained that while Herna might look like she's just the arena's manager, she was actually the one running the whole city. As long as Jin-ho was here, he was gonna run into her again. Jin-ho just shrugged it off, saying Herna just seemed like some greedy old fox, a nickname Ryu confirmed the locals totally used for her. Jin-ho knew Herna had come to him to try and cash in on his talent, and it reminded him of his early days in the martial arts world. Back then, as soon as he started getting noticed, he was swamped with offers from managers who just saw him as a paycheck. He had been scammed a bunch of times before he finally met his current manager, who actually helped him become a champion. Jin-ho wondered how his manager was doing. Thanks to all that, Jin-ho was no longer the naive kid from the sticks who could be easily played. He had clawed his way to the top, going through tons of challenges to become a champ. He thought about Herna's reputation as a total shark. Sly old fox, and just decided to play it cool, knowing the pro would eventually show his cards. Then the waiter brought their food, and Ryu's eyes totally bugged out at the sight of what he thought was the real deal Verity beef. Just as Ryu was about to chow down, Jin-ho was like, "Hold up," and told him the beef was a total knockoff. The color and the marbling were all wrong, which blew Ryu's mind. When Ryu was like, "What's marbling?" Jin-ho explained that something was definitely sketchy. He remembered it took Clark the warden a whole week to get his hands on Verity beef, and if you could just grab it from the next town over, it wouldn't have taken that long. Verity beef is supposed to be super exclusive, so there's no way this place could be serving it to every single customer. Jin-ho figured it was probably the cheaper Wagyu beef, which, even though it's only one step down, is way, way worse quality-wise. Ryu, still totally lost, argued that once the beef was in their stomachs, who cares if it was Wagyu or Verity? He was just way too hungry to deal. But Jin-ho flagged the waiter down. He told Ryu that if they paid for the good stuff and got a fake, they had every right to get what they actually paid for. It was all about making it right, especially since they were broke. The waiter, looking super annoyed, basically told them to stop making a scene and just eat. He got all snippy, saying they only ordered one thing and were wasting everyone's time. Jin-ho, super calm but firm, was like, "This beef is a fake. We ordered Verity beef." He asked the waiter, "Shouldn't you serve what people actually order?" Jin-ho was getting ticked that this place was pulling a scam and then acting all high and mighty about it. The waiter shot back, asking if Jin-ho thought this was some kind of street hustle that only works on chumps. Jin-ho just smirked and told the guy to quit yapping and get his boss. The waiter, totally livid now, mumbled something about how this little punk had a death wish. Jin-ho just grinned and was like, "Let the little coward talk," loud enough for other customers to hear. The waiter, seeing people staring, got super mad and told Jin-ho to shut it and follow him. So the waiter takes them to the boss, this huge dude surrounded by beefy guys holding giant meat cleavers. The boss is like, "So you're the lowlife punks, making a scene." Jin-ho shot back that the boss was the one with no class selling fake meat. The boss just let out a huge laugh, saying he admired the kid's guts, but warned Jin-ho he needed to learn how to read the room. Jin-ho just balled up his fist and told the guy, "I might not get the vibe, but you definitely don't get what's happening." Then he asked the boss which side he thought was gonna get wrecked if they all jumped him. That made the boss totally lose it, and he screamed that Jin-ho was about to get a serious reality check. He sicked his guys on him and they all rushed Jin-ho in, like 2 seconds. But Jin-ho just dodged, hit back, and took down all 4 of them. He decked the first guy, snatched the second guy's weapon, and snapped his arm, laid out the third one, and body slammed the 4th dude. The whole fight was over before you could even blink. The boss, who was laughing his head off a second ago, now looked totally freaked out with his guys all sprawled on the floor, completely messed up. He was yelling like, "What just happened?" Ryu, grinning like an idiot, started taunting the guys, asking if they even knew who they were messing with. He bragged that Jin-ho was the dude who took down ICAS. The boss, who totally blew off the rumors about ICAS getting beat, suddenly realized it was for real. He got all nervous and asked Jin-ho what he wanted. Jin-ho just calmly said that they were finally on the same page. He said he was a reasonable guy and just wanted what was fair. He gave him 2 options. First, the boss had to give them their money back, and second, from now on, he had to give them real Verity beef for the price of the cheap stuff. The boss was floored, yelling that they were acting like a bunch of gangsters. A little later, in a super nice inn, Ryu was stretched out on the comfy bed, totally amazed at how plush it was. He was all giddy, telling Jin-ho he'd never slept on anything so soft, and that it was the best thing ever. Ryu also said that Jin-ho's moves back there were epic, totally something a noble would pull. Jin-ho, just chilling on his own bed, replied that if people found out about the restaurant's fake beef, it would totally trash their reputation. For a guy with zero leverage, he explained trying to make a deal is a total nightmare. Ryu just laughed, remembering how mad the boss looked, and thanked Jin-ho for their sweet new setup, saying he was living the high life. Jin-ho was like, "Yeah," and told him they should get some rest. Hours later, Ryu woke up and opened his eyes. He sat up and quietly whispered Jin-ho's name, but got nothing back, figuring Jin-ho was knocked out. Ryu got dressed super quietly and snuck out of the room, having no clue that Jin-ho was totally awake. A few days later, Ryu yelled for Jin-ho, asking when they were gonna grub because he was starving. Jin-ho was right in the middle of doing push-ups, and Ryu was like, "Dude, you never chill, you're always training." Ryu asked if Jin-ho was all about the physical stuff because he had zero mana, saying that mages would rather die than sweat. Jin-ho said it was for a pretty similar reason, which just confused Ryu even more. Jin-ho pulled up his status screen, getting so frustrated seeing that his mana still hadn't gone up no matter how many times he looked. He started thinking maybe he was cursed or something. He figured going from 0 to 1 mana was probably like making something from thin air, which meant it was gonna take a while for sure. But he knew that first step was a total game changer, and once he nailed it, his mana would probably start leveling up way faster. Jin-ho told Ryu the morning workout was a wrap, and it was time to grub. Ryu was like, "So where to?" suggesting potato salad or chicken stew. But Jin-ho was like, "Nah, let's switch it up and get beef," which totally got Ryu pumped. They raced over to the steakhouse. It had been 3 whole days since they'd last been, and Jin-ho's reasoning was simple. They needed to lay low and not cause a scene. The first time they went, they absolutely destroyed 10 servings of beef, and with plenty of cash to burn, they'd totally splurged. Jin-ho turned to Ryu. "Yo, how much cash we got left?" And Ryu admitted it wasn't much. Sure, the city was crazy expensive, but Jin-ho knew that burning through 50 gold coins in just a few days was just insane. He had to wonder if Ryu, with his fancy noble background, was just totally clueless about how money actually works. Plus, Jin-ho was starting to get this vibe that Ryu might be skimming some cash for himself, but he decided to just play it cool for now. He knew he couldn't ignore it forever, but figured if he could just understand why Ryu was doing it, he could probably handle the situation later. Over at the steakhouse, some dude scrambled to his boss, letting him know Jin-ho and Ryu had just shown up. The owner, a guy named F, had an ego the size of the city, but not the cash to back it up. He just couldn't swallow the fact that he'd been totally owned by some random kid. F asked his guy, "Is everything set up like I told you?" Meanwhile, in the VIP room, a waiter was respectfully showing Jin-ho and Ryu to their table. The room was totally decked out with a griller, platters of raw meat, and even some seasoned cooked meat ready to go. The waiter told them they'd prepared tons of meat and to just dig in. Ryu was totally blown away, asking, "Dude, how much does all this even cost?" The waiter just dipped out, saying to give a shout if they needed anything. Jin-ho was immediately suspicious, like why was the staff suddenly so chill? Ryu figured it might be because Jin-ho had put the fear in them last time, but Jin-ho wasn't buying it. He'd cased the joint the second they walked in and hadn't spotted anyone shady, and the place looked exactly the same as before. He couldn't figure out what their whole deal was. Ryu, totally oblivious, wrapped a perfect piece of meat in lettuce and handed it to Jin-ho saying, "Yo, this is a special one just for you," and that he should down it in one bite. "Thanks, man," Jin-ho said, taking the wrap. He decided right then they'd have to keep their eyes wide open since careful watching might reveal what the restaurant staff was plotting. But the second the food touched his mouth, he froze solid. The taste was just wrong. In a total panic, he yelled at Ryu, "Spit that out now, don't eat another bite." Ryu, who was in the middle of stuffing his face with meat, jumped totally confused. Ryu immediately spat everything out when Jin-ho explained the meat was poisoned. He forced himself to get sick, panicking and asking if he was going to die. Jin-ho calmed him down, saying a tiny bit wouldn't be fatal. It all clicked for him. Then this was their messed up plan all along. He couldn't believe they had the nerve to actually poison the meat staring at his absolute poison immunity skill as it kicked in against the frog's poison. Jin-ho thought to himself, "Without this ability, I would have been taken out before I even knew what hit me." He remembered, unlocking the skill by downing every single poison in the Empire from the weakest stuff to the most hardcore, all while spamming antidotes. All that agony, he realized, was totally worth it. Ryu, looking completely wiped, asked how Jin-ho could have possibly known the meat was poisoned when it had no taste or smell. Jin-ho just casually replied, "Because I'm an Arahan," leaving Ryu completely mind-blown, thinking these elite nobles were on a whole other level. Ryu asked what the plan was. "Should we run?" Jin-ho just scoffed. "Run? Why would we run?" Instead, he declared they were going to make these clowns pay big time. He stormed into the VIP room totally ticked off and yelled that the little punks should have just eaten their food and kept quiet. He demanded to know who gave them the right to call for him. Jin-ho, cool as ever, just said he wanted to clear up a misunderstanding and ask a few questions. F glanced at the empty plates and smirked, assuming they'd eaten everything. He knew that if they'd really ingested the frog's poison, the effects would be kicking in any second. F then angrily accused them of shaking him down for cash, but Jin-ho calmly replied that F had the wrong idea. He suggested they should just talk it out over some good food and make peace. He nodded toward the food Ryu was putting together. Ryu handed F a meat wrap and told him, "Here, eat up." F stammered, asking what the heck this was, and Ryu just calmly explained it was a peace offering. Jin-ho added that if F accepted, he'd be willing to forget about the second condition of their last deal since they weren't really criminals anyway. F, however, totally refused to eat it, saying he had zero interest in making peace. Jin-ho then asked if his refusal meant he wanted to keep paying them, or if there was another reason he couldn't eat the wrap? Like maybe it was poisoned. Jin-ho's playful smirk dropped, his expression turning hard. F was visibly terrified, but still tried to deny it. Jin-ho, his anger rising, told F he'd been playing along up until now. Then with just one hand, he shoved the massive table aside like it was nothing, totally freaking F out. When F's eyes landed on the chewed-up meat on the floor, he realized Jin-ho knew about the poison. F's mind was racing, trying to figure out how Jin-ho could have possibly known. Jin-ho told F he was planning on going easy on him, but now he just saw him as total trash. He demanded to know if F had actually poisoned their food. F tried to play it cool, insisting there was no poison and telling Jin-ho to prove it. Jin-ho just took out his colored lenses, revealing his glowing red eyes, and declared that this was all the proof he needed. F was completely frozen, finally realizing Jin-ho was an Arahan. Jin-ho asked if F really had the guts to lie to an Arahan's face, and warned him he was going to pay for it with his life. F just collapsed to the floor, shaking in pure terror. Jin-ho added that if someone like F just disappeared, it wouldn't even be a blip on the news. F, completely consumed by fear, dropped to his knees and begged for mercy, apologizing like crazy and claiming he had no idea. Jin's secret was out. F was totally bugging, like why would a legit Arahan from the western region show up in this middle-of-nowhere town? And why was Jin-ho playing the part of some homeless dude? But honestly, he was too scared to even think straight. The guy just kept begging for forgiveness, literally bawling his eyes out like a little kid. Jin-ho realized the Arahan name was way more powerful than he'd ever thought. This kind of influence he figured could be super useful. After letting him stew for a bit, Jin-ho calmed down and told F that since he seemed for real, he'd let it slide just this once. F bowed over and over, promising he'd be grateful forever and would never forget Jin-ho's mercy. Jin-ho laid down the rules. First, F was never ever to tell anyone who he was, which F was all too happy to agree to, even swearing he'd take it to his grave and beyond. Second, F had to hand over half of all his money. And in return, Jin-ho would pretend this whole thing never happened. F hesitated for like a second, but then caved, offering to get the cash immediately. He was actually kind of touched by how generous the Arahan was being. He was probably thinking that money is useless if you're dead. He figured he'd better just pay up before Jin-ho changed his mind, but then he froze solid when he heard someone walking up. Jin-ho immediately popped his blue contacts back in. Ryu, all hyped up, whispered that it was just what you'd expect from an Arahan, pointing out how F was too scared to even breathe. Jin-ho, though, was totally focused. He told Ryu that as soon as they got the money, they were bouncing from the city that night. Ryu was like, "Sounds like a plan." All of a sudden, a woman walked into the VIP room and asked F where he was rushing off to. Jin-ho was surprised to see Herna with her bodyguard right behind her. She gave him a sweet smile and said, "Look who it is again." She added that he was way more impressive than she'd first thought. Jin-ho didn't say anything, his mind racing, wondering if Herna knew he was an Arahan, and if F had already blabbed. But F, freaking out when he saw Jin's look, started shaking his head, like crazy, signaling that he hadn't ratted him out. Jin-ho realized F was genuinely terrified of him, which meant Herna could have only gotten the info from one other place. He knew if she found out he was just faking being an Arahan, the money was gone. It was time to move. Jin-ho turned to Herna and suggested they talk somewhere private, and she was more than happy to agree. A minute later, in a private room, Jin-ho asked Herna straight up why she was there and what she wanted from him. She just said it was a misunderstanding. She hadn't shown up for him today, but to meet her client. Jin-ho was confused until he saw Ryu's totally guilty face. Ryu muttered an apology, and Herna explained that she wasn't trying to hide anything. She'd looked into Ryu's request, but would need more cash to keep going. Ryu jumped to his feet, shocked, yelling that this wasn't their deal. He asked Herna if she knew how much he'd already paid, but she just coolly replied that the amount barely covered her lunch for one day. She asked if Ryu really thought it was easy to find someone who just vanished, dead or alive. Ryu, looking like he was about to cry, stammered that this was his last hope. It all clicked for Jin-ho. He suggested to Herna that they just roll their problems into one, which totally surprised Ryu. Herna asked if Jin-ho meant that if she helped her client, he'd do what she wanted. She liked the sound of that, and added that her request was simple. She wanted him to fight Ios again. Ryu immediately flipped, yelling that it was obviously a trap, but Jin-ho just ignored him and accepted the rematch. Then he asked Herna if she'd go through with Ryu's request. She licked her lips, agreed, and promised him she always keeps her word. Later, they were walking down the street in total silence, Ryu hauling a chest full of money. Jin-ho asked why he looked so bummed when they'd just made a fortune. Ryu apologized again, explaining that he didn't mean to hide what he was doing at first. Jin-ho just calmly said, "I already knew." Ryu confessed he'd gone to Herna for help behind his back, knowing it was stupid but feeling like he had no other choice. Jin-ho just said he understood, then added that he'd also noticed Ryu skimming some extra money for himself. Ryu was shocked that Jin-ho had known the whole time. Jin-ho explained he only pieced it together when Ryu went to Herna. Ryu asked why Jin-ho hadn't called him out, and Jin-ho said he didn't mind because the help Ryu gave him was worth it. But then he warned him that he couldn't just let it slide forever. From now on, Ryu had to be straight with him because breaking someone's trust is the absolute worst thing in the world. Jin-ho added that no matter where Ryu was from, he shouldn't let himself become garbage. Ryu, tearing up, swore he wouldn't do it again. Then he begged Jin-ho not to do the rematch, suggesting they just take the money and run like they'd planned. Jin-ho asked what about his brother, and Ryu admitted he knew the truth. Herna was just playing them to scam them again. Ryu said he wasn't dumb enough to fall for someone like Herna, but his desperation made him do it. Jin-ho realized Herna was the kind of adult who preys on desperate kids. He told Ryu he was originally planning to leave, but this changed everything. Ryu was shocked, and asked if Jin-ho was seriously going through with the rematch. Ryu yelled that while he trusted Jin's skills, Herna would definitely pull some dirty tricks. Jin-ho replied that this was the exact reason he wanted to do it, which just confused Ryu even more. Jin-ho explained that when he sees trash, he likes to take it out. Plus, beating an opponent who's giving it their all is the best feeling. Meanwhile, at the Carion prison, soldiers were scrambling to get information. One soldier reported to Clark that the troops were ready to go. Clark praised them and ordered the first unit to move out immediately. The soldier acknowledged the command. Clark completely lost it, slamming his fist on the table so hard it just shattered. He was going off about Jin-ho being right under his nose the whole time and swore he was going to end him for good once he found him just screaming his name in a total rage. Alright, that's it for this video. Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let me know if you want the next part.